Welcome to the Water Entrepreneur Podcast. This program features a series of interviews exploring the origin stories of startup founders, early adopters, and innovation champions related to their personal, technical, business, organizational, and financial journeys. This podcast is sponsored by ASTERRA, the leader in remote Earth observation technology for the water business. Support is also supplied by Imagine H2O, envisioning and building solutions with the world's best water entrepreneurs. And now, live from beautiful downtown Encinitas, your host, Paul Gagliardo. Welcome and thanks for joining me today. This is episode 1 of the Water Entrepreneur Podcast, and I'm your host, Paul Gagliardo. And today I'm very excited to have as my guest, Laurent Guy, CTO and founder of ASTERRA, using remote Earth observation to detect leaks in underground water and wastewater infrastructure pipelines. Hi, Lauren. Thanks for being a water entrepreneur and appearing on the show today.
Great. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So you're not at ACE this week, huh?
No, I wasn't at ACE this year, actually, for the first time after a few years, but I heard it was great. So yeah, next year, maybe. Yeah.
I saw the pictures of everybody on LinkedIn, so it looks like they were having a good time.
Having fun without me. Yeah.
So, it's my understanding that the technology you're leveraging comes out of the space exploration sector. Synthetic aperture radar was used to search for water on other planets. Once there were satellites that could illuminate Earth with SAR, this technique could be applied to search for leaks here. Many people have bemoaned the fact that so much money is spent on extraterrestrial investigations, but in this case, the money has developed an Earth-based solution. I'm curious to hear kind of how you got into this business in the first place, but before we go there, I think we all want to know, is there water on Mars?
There is water on Mars. I'm glad to say that. Everyone should know that. But it's not a mystery anymore. We know there's water on Mars. There's flowing water on Mars under the ground. So yes, we can move there tomorrow.
Well, we have to wait for SpaceX, right?
Yeah. I think Elon is working on that.
So how did you get involved in this business in the first place, or I guess, this technology in the first place?
Yeah, so originally I'm not from the water business. I started as a geologist in my bachelor degree, then I moved on to geophysics. And on geophysics, I focused mostly on radiation and how we can use different radiation to our purposes, to the earth sciences purposes. And one of the interesting studies that we've done is looking for substances like water or other stuff on other planets, mostly on Venus and Mars. And if we're focusing on the water side, there was a lot of study on Mars trying to find any indication of water. We know that once there was flowing water on Mars, we see that in the dry rivers that we see there. And we estimated that there's supposed to be water under the ground that's actually flowing and it isn't evaporated. So we used radar for that. Radar can penetrate the ground. And because we cannot walk on Mars yet, we use satellites with radars on top of them to find any indication of water under the ground. So it all started with that, and that's how I got involved in the water market, space water, and yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Were these the radar signals that were used to search for water on Mars, were they satellite-based? Were they orbiting Mars? Were they orbiting Earth? How did that work? And you're from Israel. Does Israel have a space program, or whose satellites were you using?
So many people are surprised to learn that there are satellites orbiting Mars. Not a lot of people know that. They think that we only have satellites on Earth and we have maybe probes on Mars, but there are several satellites orbiting Mars, giving us an interesting view from different aspects. Israel does have a space program, but as Israel is always around defense, so I wonder why. So this study wasn't involving the Israeli Space Agency; it was more granted by the European Space Agency and NASA as well. And yeah, so there are satellites orbiting Mars, mostly for scientific use, of course, and we use those resources to our purposes.
So do you have to book time on the satellite? Is that how one would do scientific research there?
If you're referring to the Mars one, you have
Yes.
to be a part of a program.
Okay.
99% of the times it has to be through the university or some kind of an academic research. Yeah, it's not open to the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you have, mentors or muses that advised you to either, look at something or, enter a specific area, or conversely, stay away from a specific area, like the water business, for example?
So when I finished my studies, I actually wondered what I can do with this degree, geophysics. Where are you going to work with the geophysics degree? And I consulted with one of my advisors. His name is Professor Dan Bloomberg. He's actually one of the advisory board at ASTERRA right now. And again, being from Israel, everyone usually being drawn out to the defense industry. Radar, as most of the applications of radars are in defense, of course. But that's not me. I always try to stay away from defense or everything that on that matter. And in Israel, when you grow up in Israel, you're always being taught to conserve water. As a kid, they taught you when you brush your teeth, you have to stop the tap while you brush your teeth, and in that magnitude. So water was always around me. And when I studied geology, I also focused on hydrology. So that was one of my, go-to fields that I might work at. So I consulted with Professor Bloomberg, and we didn't really find something interesting that I can do. And then, it's like in the movies, I had like this light above my head, and I asked him, can we do the same that we've done on Mars here on Earth? And he told me what? To find water? No, yeah, but not just any kind of water. I'm sure there are some kind of water that needs to be found. At that point, by the way, I didn't know about the fact that there is non-revenue water, which is crazy. Not a lot of people on Earth know that. So I started digging into that, and I discovered the NRW world and how extreme the situation is. And I was amazed that 30, 40, 25% of the water is just being lost. And it's such a waste, especially when water is a scarce resource. So I just said that I have to try that, and start with that.
So when you started the company, obviously you're a technical person, did you start with a kind of management or business partner, or how did that part of the genesis of the company go?
Yeah, so in the beginning, actually, in the first 2 years, I was still very skeptic that this is possible. And I had this like an imposter syndrome that I'm just trying to do something, which is not really feasible. So in the first 2 years of the company, I was alone working on the algorithms. It was quite a slow pace if I'm thinking about it now. I used a local utility here in Israel that helped me do the research. We simulated leakages. I took images from satellites orbiting Earth. And after 2 years, or even 3 years, I saw that there is some merit to use this kind of technology. But again, as a technology guy, I'm really not into business. Even now, I'm not the best business guy. Should ask my wife. So I started looking for someone, and I knew someone that knew someone, and I've met a person named Eli Peretz. He's still the CEO of the company, and he's done a great job evolving the company to the position that we are here now. Yeah.
So when you first started, especially in those formative years, did you attract some kind of grant funding? Did you find angel investors? Were you just eating cans of beans? How did that go?
So I was 24 and I actually just got married. I was married quite young. And my wife is a kindergarten teacher, so money wasn't flowing all around. So we lived in the basement of some house, and trying to survive. And I didn't have any income for 24 months. Oh. So we tried to survive as much as possible. And yes, eating from cans, making spaghetti every day. Yes, things on that nature. But after I think maybe 12 or 18 months, where I saw that I have something, I asked my uncle, actually, he has some capital. I told him about my idea, and I just need a small amount of money just to make sure that it is possible. And I need to buy some satellite images that cost, $5,000. For a company, $5,000 is not a lot, but for someone, for someone with no job, $5,000 is like it's like 2 months grocery items. So he agreed to loan me a few thousands of dollars, and that was quote unquote my first angel. He already got his money back, which is good. So we're in a good relationship.
That's good.
So he was my first small angel, and after 24 months, where I saw it's going well, I started looking for a grant here in Israel. Israel is a very big startup nation, so we have many grants being granted by the government, especially for R&D. So I got quite a big grant, around $600,000, which is very nice for a small company. And then Ellie joined, and we grew a little bit, and then we took our first amount from a venture capital. So the usual startup path.
Yeah. Did you find it difficult or challenging to find the right, VC partner? Because I know a lot of them have very specific niches about the kinds of things they invest in, and they tend to be very particular. And especially when you were looking, which was probably 5-6 years ago, there was still a little bit of reticence of investing in the water business because there was a perception that there was going to be a longer exit. It was going to take a longer time for them to get their money out, and so there was a little bit. I think that's changed a little bit now. But so did you guys kind of run through a lot of VCs before you found the right partner?
So in the beginning, I was very naive. I thought that VCs are interested in technology, and they are not interested in technology. They're interested about business and how they can get money as fast as possible. So I was quite shocked that people didn't throw money on me from the beginning. So I agree with you totally. The water business is not a very appealing business for VCs. It's a very slow market. It has a bad name, I think, in many cases, slow sales cycle and all of that. So it took us a few months, but I think if I compare myself to other companies that I see now and then in the water business and business that are similar to that, I think it was quite fast. Our first VC is a very small one here in Israel. They took the chance. I think I've met them after 3 months of trying. And they took the chance, they invested a little bit, and I think they see the dividends now, which is good. But it was very weird for me from the beginning to see that not everyone is interested about the technology.
Right.
Just the road to the money.
Yeah. So do you think that starting a business in Israel was advantageous for you as opposed to someplace else?
Yeah, for sure. Growing up in Israel, young people, the dream job is not to be a doctor or to be something like that. It's to found your own startup. It's quite funny. So growing up in Israel, and if you want to find people for your company, especially when you are a small company and you're looking for people to work for you, but with similar mind, more or less, the venture mind, the crazy mind, I think it's easier in Israel than in other places. Also in Israel, it's quite popular that you don't pay people in the beginning. You give them options in the company. So it's also very good for a very young company without revenues That's not the same in other places, as I understand. Also, the Israeli culture is, it's very, very innovative. Even in the army, if you compare the army to the American army, in the American army, even an officer cannot make the decision on his own. He has to get, approval from higher superior officers. In the Israeli army, it's not the same. As an officer, you can make your own decisions. It's your fault if it's not working, but you can make your own decisions. And I think it's a nice example to show that we're always trying to be innovative and not to work in a very hierarchy, way of life, more of a matrix, which is also, I think, is very helpful. And we are not afraid to fail. We don't see fail as, a big failure. If you fail, you try again. Which is also not very popular in other cultures, I think. So yeah, I think the Israeli culture is supporting that in many cases. And as I said, the government gives a lot of grants, many grants to many different kinds of ventures, even in the water business, to go as much as technology as possible.
Interesting. So, many startups I've talked to, some of them run away from the municipal market because it's viewed as too difficult to crack, long sales cycles, everybody's conservative. Kind of by definition, with the product you were developing, that was going to be your customer. So did you kind of understand what you were getting yourself into?
So no. So as I said in the beginning, I wasn't even thinking about the business, about the way to make money. And again, I was very naive, I think. I started this water business without even thinking if there is a market for that, even in that magnitude.
Oh, wow.
So no, I didn't think about that. But as time went by and the CEO joined and the first VP of sales, Eddie, joined, I realized that I didn't choose the right market. It's not the most easiest market. It was a big challenge. It's still a very big challenge. If you ask me today if I would start it with that market, I don't know if my answer will be very sincere. Yeah. But I think we cracked it in some way, and it's all about creating the pipeline. Even with slow and long sales cycles, if you create the right pipeline and if you have the right name and the right quote unquote popularity in the field, you can create the pipeline and money will arrive. Yeah.
So as you're looking at, attracting customers, do you feel like, what was your primary selling point? Was it the value proposition, saving money? Was it, ESG related things, kind of more on the societal end of the spectrum? And then even in the United States, there's 50,000 utilities, right? So how did you pick the ones to go after, and then how did you? It's been my experience that it's not only finding the potential customer that has the need, but finding the person within that company that you can pitch to that either has the ability to buy or the influence to convince somebody else to buy. So how did you kind of navigate just even identifying the customers and then identifying the person within the customer to make the pitch to?
Yeah, our first slogan in the company was, you can find leaks from space. And this is what we took to the first utilities we spoke to in the US, in Europe, and they didn't care. They didn't care how they are finding the leaks. All they care is the ROI and how much they spend about finding the leaks. So they were not lining, wanting to buy the product because we couldn't prove to them that we can give them the benefits of using our solution. Because in the beginning, it even looks pricier. You take satellite images, you have to go to the field, they have to do something and be active, which is a lot of expense. So it was a very hard selling point in the beginning, for sure. People were not buying it like crazy. So we had to realize and we had to understand that we became some kind of an expert in that field. to try and learn together with the client, and after that to teach new clients about water leakages, about the ROI, about the benefits of using an active system and not just be reactive. It was a journey. I always joke and say that my son is calling me a plumber from space, because we gain knowledge. We went to the field. I wore those yellow vests in the middle of nowhere in Texas, in Singapore, in China, in the middle of nowhere, trying to understand what's the paining point of the utilities and the guys in the field. Because, even in the beginning, you can convince the manager, you can convince the CEO, but if the guy in the field is not convinced, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So we had to go to the field and be their friends and to understand what's their pains and go from that. Yeah.
So did you spend a lot of time just trying to get people to understand how this synthetic aperture radar worked, and how it could even do what you were saying it would do? I mean, did you find that being kind of almost the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I guess that the water industry is very conservative. They're not really receptive to changes. So when we started marketing our solutions, I think most of the utilities, I still remember my first time at ACE 2016. We had a very, very small booth with the slogan, "You can find leaks from space." I went with Ellie and Eddie and someone else. And I think everyone came to the booth, thought we are some kind of a charlatans from the Middle East trying to sell something. I still remember the faces. It was a big uphill challenge to convince people that we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we have the technology knowledge, and now we are trying to learn how to apply this technology to your industry, and we're willing to work with you and to understand your pains. And I think the first utility that we worked with really in the US was East Bay Mud, they are very innovative. And they assigned some people to work with us, and we learned a lot from them. I spent 2 weeks in the field with them in Oakland. So it was a real journey for sure. And I think at that time as well, we also joined an accelerator, Imagine H2O, which we won eventually, luckily. So we learned a lot from there as well about the day-to-day operations of the American utilities. And again, we became experts. That's the only way to sell to those guys. You have to be an expert. You have to look legit, I think. Yeah.
So did you find that kind of separate from the technology specific issues, just the fact that you had something different that it maybe didn't fit into the standard procurement process?
Yeah, we were always amazed how those utilities can spend millions of dollars on valves and sensors and all of that, and then we want to sell something for $20,000, and they give us a nightmare. So it was very strange for them to spend money like that. Definitely, it was very, very. Yeah,
it's it's whenever you're trying to sell something new, it's just the fact that it's new is hard.
Yeah, I remember I went to some board meetings that about us for different utilities, and you see how they approve millions of dollars on valves and sensor, and then they speak about us and they argue for a few tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, it's funny.
So speaking of money, how did you decide, like on the business model, relative to, some folks will look at, cost plus margin as their business model. Some others will say, okay, I think the value of my product is this, and I don't really care what they're spending now. I'm going to base my business model on the perceived value? I mean, which kind of tactic did you guys take?
Yeah, I think we feel that the perceived value is very, very high, but because the utilities are not very receptive to changes, we have to speak their languages. For example, utilities love to speak with kilometers of pipes or miles of pipe or length of pipes or days in the field. Things like that. So we couldn't sell, the usual Silicon Valley SaaS models of you buy subscription and I give you information and data. That wasn't the case. So we had to make our solution in a way that they're used to, meaning price it by miles of pipe or price it by days in the field. We had to speak their languages, otherwise it was very hard for them to buy the solution. Now it's a bit different because now they see the benefits, so now we can sell the value that we think is the value, but that wasn't really the case in the beginning.
So, you guys have been relatively successful. You've been, kind of in the marketplace for 6-7 years now. As companies grow, the founder's role always has to change.
Right.
Sometimes the founders don't embrace that change very well. Other ones see it and are very flexible and understand that process. How, you've gone, I don't know, how many people do you have in the company now?
Around 80. Yeah.
Okay, so you started as a one-man show and now you're at 80. How did you kind of traverse that particular chasm, from start to where you are now?
Yeah. That's actually funny. I'm not really a people person. It's always hard for me to work in big groups. So as the company grew, I found myself forced to work and forced to manage a large population of people, which was very interesting for me. And in most cases, I was the youngest. I think that I founded the company when I was 24. So when I was 27, 28, I managed people which were older than me. It's funny, now I'm 35 and I feel old. But yeah, it was really weird for me as an individual. It was always hard for me working with people. But as the company grew, of course, you understand that you have to play the game. So together with people with much more experience than me, I learned how to work in a corporate, more or less, and less of a crazy startup. Because, as a startup, you're not really organized and you do whatever you want and you are changing your plan every week and you go to every location that you think that can have money. But that's not good if you want to really scale up and be like a mature company. So learning to work in a corporate environment is very challenging. I think it's very challenging to Israeli companies when they come to the US, for example, because of the difference in culture. So that was very, very hard for me. But if you speak about the technology and my knowledge, last year or 2 years ago, I became quite frustrated that I wasn't an inventor anymore. I was, managing people, managing the R&D process, managing the product's development, and, very, very, clear path, which is not the best thing for me. So we did a bit of a change. I promoted someone to be a VP R&D. His name is Yuval. And I went sideways and I founded my own CTO office, quote unquote, within the company. It's like a startup within a startup. And that really enables me to think about how we can take our technology into new verticals. So I feel like 10 years ago when we took the technology and we tried to understand what's the right path for that. So I feel the same now, and it's very exciting for me because I love to research. I love to, to tackle impossible things, and I feel that's what I'm trying to do now, which is great for me.
So what is the next killer app?
I'm not sure I can speak.
I don't want to give away anything.
No, that's okay. But it's already public that we started with the water market, the drinking leakages. We went to sewage leakages. Then we went to soil moisture, in whole, just finding high accumulation of soil moisture in various areas. Then we went to the infrastructure side of things, finding issues around infrastructure, railways, highways. I was amazed to learn that 85% of issues around infrastructure are because of high soil moisture. It's crazy. So if you help big utilities like the Department of Transportation of some state or a railway company, monitor their entire system with a satellite every quarter, every month, every week, and give them insights on location they need to go and fix, you can save the infrastructure, and in some places you can even save lives. We saw that in a case in the UK. So we go to that. We are not trying to think about where we can take our technology now. There's the defense market where we still try to stay away from the defense market. But lately we found some very interesting possibilities in the mining industry. Like we're not yet disclosing everything. I think we'll be much more open next month. We just filed a patent on that, so hopefully we can go public on that next month. Yes, but I think that me as a person will always push the company to be in the environmental side of things. We don't want to invent cigarettes or pollute the planet. We want to help the planet. So all of the solutions will be around that.
Yeah, the infrastructure thing is interesting. I ran the landfills at the city of San Diego, and there's a major highway that is built on top of the landfill. And as you get subsidence, that asphalt starts to, boy, you go down that street at 100 kilometers an hour, man, you're really going crazy. So as we talked about, all the investors, before they even invest in a company, they have an end game in mind. They know when they want to exit, how much they want to exit for, all that. How about you? I mean, do you have an end game in mind? Have you thought about, what's, will you ever end this? Will you, just continue to grow the company? How do you see, this playing out for you?
When I was younger, a few years ago, I was very embarrassed to answer this question because I didn't, I don't like to speak about that. But I'm a bit more mature. And of course, the end game is maybe to sell the company, maybe to make my family more, in a convenient place money-wise. Of course, this is one of my goals. But I'm here to stay. We don't want to sell the company now. We don't want to run away. We think that we barely scratch the surface that we can do with this technology. So yes, VCs they have an end game, and it's always being discussed when we speak with the new VC. But we always give the message that our end game is to go fast. If you look on startups 15 years ago, 20 years ago, especially out of Israel, they always go for a few years and they sold themselves to big American corporates. And that's not the case anymore lately. You see startups in Israel going from 50 people to even 2,000 people. So we are not, it's not always trying to sell as fast as possible. I think now it's more about creating a big company, creating some kind of a culture with the employees, be a big name in our country, and not necessarily be just a small department in a big company in the US. So the end game is far. Of course, if we can make money along the way, that's great. But yeah. I'm here to stay. Yeah.
Everybody I've talked to, some of them haven't thought about it at all, and some of them have been offered buyouts already, and they're not ready. It's just something you have to think about, because people are always going to ask you.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. There is a price.
No, I love
for everything. There is a price for everything. but yeah,
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. So
no.
So are you having fun doing this? Has this been an enjoyable experience for you?
Yeah, I think many of my friends are envy me. I have an unusual life. It can be quite exhausting, but I travel all around the world. Every week, I'm usually in another country, meeting new people, meeting new clients, meeting new cultures. It's amazing to see how the water industry can differ from the US to even to Europe. You think it's the same culture, but it's not.
No.
So, yeah, I'm having fun along the way. I make my friends envy sometimes, my family as well. But yeah.
Good. Well, that's really important to have fun. Like what you're doing.
I try to. Yeah.
So, what advice would you give somebody who's considering, starting a water-centric or water-focused startup company, or maybe what's something that you didn't even know when you started this? You mentioned a few things, but I was wondering if there was anything else that's important.
So I think for new people, the most important thing to do, which I didn't do, is to validate the market, to see if there is a market need for the solution that you have in mind, if someone is willing to pay for that, if it's some kind of a blue ocean without many competitors. This is something which is a must in the beginning. It's always important, especially if you want to raise money in the beginning, to understand your client. After you speak your client language, you have to know how you are going to get money from that client, and quite fast. So, I think many technology guys or girls starting with the technology mind, they are very eager about the technology and they want to push forward. But yeah, my advice is to just hold on for a sec, try to study the market. If you cannot do that yourself, and most likely you cannot do that yourself, find an expert on that, validate everything, because most of the startups fail. Like, I think the statistic in Israel, I don't know if it's the same in the US, it's 96%
over
of
90%.
startups fail. Yeah, in Israel, which is a lot. Most startups are failed. So you need to make your percentages, you need to make your chances as high as possible, and you have to be smart, and you have to have the most knowledge as possible. It's not, luck is something, but usually you don't have any luck.
Well, Laurent, thanks for joining me today. It was really an interesting conversation, and we'll definitely track your progress as time goes on. So good luck to you, and make sure you spend a little bit of time at home with your wife and your kids.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. This podcast was brought to you by ASTERRA with additional support from Imagine H2O. The producer is Anna Gagliardo. Theme music by Gabriella Gagliardo. Yes, this is a family affair. Your host is Paul Gagliardo. If you have any questions about this podcast or the series, please contact us at thewaterentrepreneur@gmail.com. And please follow us on Instagram. We hope to see you again next time.